Welcome to Futureproofing You, cohort Kirk. And today we'd like to talk about a very important topic for all of us. First, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Andrea Cates, and I am a cross-industry revenue accelerator. And today we also have Sean Moffat, who is a co-founder of Futureproofing You, and Chenyang Xu, who is a global technology venture leader and also co-founder. We'd like to welcome cohort Kirk, fantastic people from fantastic organizations. The first group is here, and now we have a second group here. And today what we'll be doing is talking about your journeys as they continue. The first segment will be a session with Lou Pugliese, who is an expert in learning communities. And the second segment will do a catch-up where we reconnect and have headlines and insights in September. We want to make sure that we as a community can help each other, and letting you know that the next session is November the 11th, which is a Thursday. So let me introduce Lou Pugliese, who is an entrepreneur in the learning innovation space. His career spans education, entrepreneurship, venture, and private equity, and education, research, and innovation. And Lou is unique in that he's an individual where entrepreneurship meets traditional K-to-grave education, which sometimes collides. And as Lou says, we need collisions. And today he'll be talking about his thoughts on the most important topic we call perpetual refresh, which is what is happening with EdTech? How is this relevant to corporate leaders? What role should corporate leaders play? And his other hot topics and bandwagon themes. So we'd love to now, I'll stop sharing and let Lou share. Welcome Lou Pugliese, who will address the issues relevant to education and learning, especially with a corporate theme. Welcome, Lou.
Hey, thanks very much for having me on today for the Masterclass Futureproofing session. I always actually find this really enlightening. So it's an interesting topic, and I come to this from a different vantage point. First, as an entrepreneur, looking at different ways to innovate in educating, different ways to use technology, new methods for better student outcomes, student achievements, and that's broadly defined. Secondly, as a venture equity, venture capital, and private equity person who are looking at investing and sustaining ventures and things that are innovative to our industry. And then lastly, spending a better part of 7 to 10 years working inside higher education and understand how administration runs. And so we'll talk a little bit of that, and those three themes will resonate, I think, through this presentation. So those are the things that are relevant to the presentation. So to start, I think we just sort of outline some of the bigger market challenges here. And ultimately, yeah, I'm asking the question in the work that I'm doing in labor markets and workforce education is, why do we have challenges in economic development? Why do we have, regional, what do we do about regional downturns in labor markets? How do we educate the students for the future? And it's because a lot of different confluence of reasons here. One is, the supply and demand chain is gap. There's a big gap in this, and labor shortage is driving the need for new forms of education and new skills, but the supply side, is somewhat out of balance. And our systems are struggling to keep up with the need for contemporary knowledge and contemporary information and learning that's relevant to the job market. We have on good news, we've seen a significant amount of acceleration in EdTech investing and new innovations, but it's a very difficult thing to be able to understand how to apply those technologies in the right way. We see exorbitant values and valuations in companies because there are so few companies that are really solving the problem from a technology perspective, and it's a fragmented market. And so a couple of themes that I think are relevant here to solving the problem, starting with post-secondary education, where I come from, and the demographics and who we're teaching to has radically shifted. We call this the new majority learner. When we started, early technology innovation for universities, for instance, 90% of the students were undergraduate students that were typically 18 to 26 years old that, really are historically mainstream students. And now that's radically shifted. 74% are actually working adults. And yet we've engineered our education systems for the former, not the latter. And so we have to figure out how to re-engineer our systems of learning. And, frankly, some of that's being re-engineered for us just right before our eyes. And this is true for how it's being re-engineered. And this is this notion of unbundling of traditional higher education. And typically it was of 4 to 6 years to get a degree, and now that's completely different. And so competing with the traditional model are things like boot camps and apprenticeship programs and career and technical education, micro-credentialing, non-degree. And this is more of a, sort of just-in-time education experience to fill the skills gap. And there's a significant amount of capital, which we'll talk about in a minute, going to fuel that. And so, we find ourselves, working with corporations and working with government to educate, but we're, in terms of higher education, really ill-equipped to do that at scale. Everybody says that they want a university-affiliated education, whether it's a 4-year degree or a micro-credential, but it's very, very difficult for universities to begin to reshape them towards the needs of what employers, actually want. And students, are consequently turning to third-party sources. We always see new news on new alternatives like edX and Coursera, and these organizations are scaling one-to-one or consumer-based education. And now they're starting to sort of take over what higher education isn't doing. They're actually creating formal credential programs, which are putting pressure back on our historical institutions and what they're supposed to be doing and want to do in corporate education. And so we see this sort of, kind of healthy friction between a new market for consumer education that is micro-credentialed and accredited and very sophisticated in the way we're educating students and employees and new majority learners versus the traditional methods in doing that. And what the market's telling us is, there really isn't a need for a degree. You hear it from Google, you hear it from a lot of different organizations. You see it at Walmart, who's developing their own corporate universities. And what this means is that, on the green line, the need for this notion of a micro-credentialed, environment here, or just-in-time learning, or give me a certificate that I can learn in 6 weeks versus a degree, which is going to take me 4 years. So this is looking to supersede, the marketplace and traditional learning, and how this landscape is rapidly evolving. And then when you look at the labor market side and the demand side of the equation, you have this very difficult confluence of factors that are involved between, employers, state agencies who are looking to develop strong economic development recovery initiatives, students who are looking for something different to be educated, and a new different type of student that's looking to be educated, higher education that's looking to change the way it educates, and then job seekers and workforce agencies. And none of this is really aligned really well towards this goal of the need for a significant economic recovery post-pandemic, especially, but long-term economic development. So these disconnected systems need to be resolved over, what used to be 20 years. Now it's going to take 5 years to sort of resolve this, to have some sort of economic recovery impact. And at the heart of that is really data, a big data opportunity. And we'll talk about that as we get into this. And so there's this big mismatch today between education and career opportunities. We've got, $10+ million job openings. And yet, almost the same amount, are unemployed. And so, you've got this notion of, 47% of the workforce being underemployed in a job that, they're overqualified, to do. So there's a big mismatch and alignment. It's projected that more than half of employees will need to be upskilled. And that means in a short-term time frame. So that means that employers are looking for, rather than a computer science degree that's going to take, say, 6 years or 4 years to complete, or an associate's degree of some sort that'll take 2, I need to turn a network engineer into a data scientist in 6 months. And so this is significant catch up that we have to do in terms of framing and developing short form education programs that employers want. And how do we get the education supply side to develop deep, meaningful relationships with employers, government, and the public sector as well. And now when you look at the corporation side of the equation, HR has got this sort of new mandate, both at the top levels of the organization and HR at the divisional level of the organization. And so, they have to deal with these sort of new modern issues that HR departments have to grapple with. They have to deal with things like, what are the technologies and assessment that we have to assess skills? What are the real skills that we need, and how do we measure those skills? And how do we upskill, towards our strategic objectives of our own organization? And so HR is taking on a completely new dimension in terms of how we run their business and how they run the ecosystem of employees in any given company. And what employers really want, is how do we actually educate but establish real world skills into the environment? How do we give them credit for what they already know, because they're already learning on the job and they've already gotten skill competency. But if we're moving towards an upskilling environment, how do we give them credit for that? And how do we align the education with what they already know? And then, how do we get together with those education providers to sort of validate what they're supplying? When I started my employment at a major university, 92,000 online students at the University of Maryland Global Campus, I soon found out very, very quickly that there's a difference between educating for knowledge and educating for skills. So we're built all around educating for knowledge, intelligence and information about a particular subject matter. But we're not really about, we meaning higher ed, are not really about educating for skills and competencies and what students can master in a real world situation. And so we're very challenged there. And so, employers are still struggling to hire in this disconnected environment. We've got this record number, of jobs open. And the rate at which unemployed people are getting jobs are actually lower than the pre-pandemic struggles. And then you've got this sort of great resignation that we hear about. And so you've got a significant number here, about 11, almost 12 million workers have quit in 3 months, the first spring of this year. And a lot of employers think beating this great resignation is all about how do we address the work from home issue and how do we bring flexibility and but the truth is employees have a lot deeper concerns here. Did the pandemic bring on the issue? Did it really promote the issue of work from home and how we manage that and how we continue to have relationships? Absolutely, no question. But there is real prolonged uncertainty that's happened over the last year and a half that is well just beyond burnout. I think employees are continually increasingly searching for meaning in their roles, and so this sense of meaning is lacking for them in their roles. It's causing employees to question, why am I spending so much time on this job? My career is now my identity. They're questioning whether this is a fair and balanced deal between employer and employee. Is there a real reciprocal relationship that we have? And if so, why not? And what's the employer's SDG? What are they doing for social impact? How are they reaching out and making a difference in the community, nationally and internationally? And I want to be a part of that kind of company that's really got a strong mandate for SDG. And so, I think employers are in a difficult position because they need to re-engineer the relationship they have with their employees. Communication, putting meaning into work that they do, realizing that it's not just the employee that they're employing, they've actually employed an entire family in many cases. And so that's why I think that, you see this now huge surge in employers offering employee benefit programs in education, and actually some, free, in some cases, free degrees, is because not only is that, for retention, but it's also at the cross section of retaining good employees and upskilling them. And it's really bringing, meaning into the workplace. And, we need to figure out ways to do this right, to do it in more effective ways. And so if you think about, how the capital markets play, into this entire scene, is that, we've got these material changes in global education. And if you look at sort of pre-pandemic, you've got almost $6 trillion, expenditures, and $6 million about in looking at underlying population growth and putting money into the education system, in particular in technology areas. And then, a significant ramp to almost 8 trillion, post-COVID, that's happening now to sort of, how do we digitize the world? How do we reshape the workforce for remote working? How do we develop sense of communities? How do we develop more impactful education programs with new technologies that really bring us all together, in this quest to have a better experience at work, upskilling opportunities for employees, and then the result being, economic development, we hope. And so, education technology itself, is a very significant opportunity. It's 6.4 trillion opportunity, where most of the spending traditionally has been on non-digital programs. Now we're starting to really shift and look at new markets such as JobTech, and how do we actually use technology and AI to be able to bridge the gap between what we're providing as an education experience, what students and new majority learners need to know in this marketplace, and what they're doing in terms of their skill alignment to a real job. What's the underlying technology that enables that? And we have, extremely, good tools at an enterprise level to be able to do that, and a significant investment in venture equity, in new emerging tools on the marketplace. So it's moving quite quickly, in terms of addressing this problem. And you look at, this funding that are happening for unicorns. These are all organizations that, are trying to address the problem in workforce all of a sudden, to be able to bridge this, this supply and demand. And so these alternative technologies, these alternative software applications, and companies that are providing a bridge between the supply and demand, and significant raises. Guild, for instance, at $150 million in revenue, as a $3.8 billion market cap, is unprecedented. So there's real significant investments going on, and hopefully these will pay off over time. And then investment in EdTech's, industry in general are at record highs, and moving, more than doubled in 2021. So, a lot of capital going into the marketplace in various different forms, whether it's, low-level seed capital for new investment ventures, all the way up to, control buyouts and private equity, to be able to ramp the capacity on the technology side. So it's quite significant. And then behind that, you've got about 17 billion, going into the marketplace, from the government with the American Rescue Plan, and what's going to happen with the new infrastructure plan that's being debated right now, a significant amount of government funding. So, a lot of capital market activity going in to try to solve the problem, hopefully used in intelligent and efficient ways. And then exits, a significant amount of exits that are happening. If that's a validating benchmark for any of us, it's been, quite significant in terms of the type of exits that are in the marketplace in terms of fueling new capital markets. And then this whole notion of the emergence of job tech. Job tech is a new category that Chief Partners Ryan Craig has coined. And it's really all about the job tech ecosystem, which means these are the components of different technology platforms for job seekers, job boards, talent discovery, AI applications, talent engagement, coaching skills, education programs, competency skills, pathways, and labor market analytics and labor market influence, things that data will influence how we create economic development opportunity for all. And so there's a significant amount of this underlying technology that's now being fueled into the marketplace to be able to solve this original gap in lots of different areas that we talked about earlier on. So that's pretty much my my soapbox for the day and what I'm involved in on a regular basis. And these are the kinds of things that are on my mind every day, and try to figure out how do we bring together these disparate solutions and these disparate problems and bring those together as one coherent solution to economic development. So it's kind of my summary for today.
Well, I'll say thank you officially. And after I say my thank you, then I'll turn off the recording. And then if you have a couple minutes, it would be great for you to meet the people here and for you to answer some questions. So once again, I think this is really timely. It strikes me one of the themes we talk about, as we said, is perpetual refresh. And when we talked about it at first, we were sort of riffing off of the hit refresh button that Satya Nadella wrote in his book, in terms of the reinvention of a company itself. The key to all of this is that we believe that the critical skill for competitive advantage is speed to knowledge, speed to understanding, speed to skills, speed to competencies, and looking ahead so that we can really anticipate what is coming next and prepare for it. So this was tremendously valuable, and I want everyone to connect with Lou. And Lou, do you want to say out loud what your email address is so that for people listening to it, they can hear your email address?
Sure, it's Lou Pugliese, L-O-U-P as in Paul, U-G-L-I-E-S-E @gmail.com. Just first and last name @gmail.com.
Perfect. Okay, well, I'll say thank you for this, and then I'll turn off the recording and we'll have some questions.